Good evening, everyone. Great to see everyone again. And for those who haven't met me, I'm Tim Wong. I'm the project manager for the city's housing element update. And once again, congratulations for being selected for the city's housing element working group. Since this is the first meeting, I will call the meeting to order. So we'll begin with the roll call, and I will just call everyone's name alphabetically, and you just need to respond with a present or a yes. So Anupa Bajwa.
Present.
Great. Sheena Chin.
Present.
Hi, Sheena. Aishitu Fatima Dozie.
Present.
Hamilton Hitchings.
Present.
Rashawn Hosger Carahan.
Present.
Okay. Catherine Jordan.
Yes, here.
Arthur Keller.
Present.
Cheryl Klein. Cheryl. I saw Cheryl, but.
Sorry. Yes, I'm here.
Cheryl, you might be on mute. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I'm here.
No worries. Ed Lowing.
Present.
Jennifer Liu.
Here.
Pat Markovich.
Present.
Keith Reckdahl.
Here.
Jean Snyder.
Here.
Jacinia Solorio.
Present.
Randolph Tien.
Here.
And Dino Bartello is absent, and Jessica Van Bork.
Present.
Okay, great. Thank you all. And so next slide, please. And so this is just a brief overview of what we'll be touching on for today's meeting. We'll be having a presentation from the City Attorney's Office about the Brown Act, another presentation about Housing Element 101, what goes into a housing element. We'll be discussing working group processes. We will be electing co-chairs for this evening. And lastly, we'll be talking about next steps. Oh, wow, I see a transcription below. Okay. Next slide, please. Slide before. I think you skipped about housekeeping. So, and before we get started with introductions, just some housekeeping items I'd like to go over. If we could have one person speak at a time, and please keep the comments brief. We have a fairly large group, and we want to make sure that everyone's voice is heard. And, you know, we've all lived it by now, but technology happens. And so please be flexible and patient if we have some glitches. Also, please mute yourself when you are not speaking. And we'd like to encourage that everyone share video that we can stay visually connected, understanding that life happens and sometimes you may need to step away or turn off your camera, that's fine. But for the most part, if you could keep your camera on so we could be connected. And if you haven't already done so, if you could put your name on the Zoom screen, that would be great. So thanks for that. Next slide. Next slide, please.
I'm having a difficulty here. The writing is on my slide screen, so
okay.
I can't.
All right. Well, just the next slide will be welcome and introductions. So at this point, I would like to introduce the Director of Planning and Development Services, Jonathan Late, who has some welcoming remarks. So, John?
Great, thank you. Thank you, Tim. And good evening, working group members. Again, I'm Jonathan Late. I'm the Director of Planning and Development Services. If you're not familiar with that city department, basically we review construction drawings and issue building permits. We perform inspections, including code enforcement. And we work on policy documents that regulate and guide future activity in the city, including this one, preparation of a housing element. So thank you for your volunteering and being a part of this endeavor. As I look around the Zoom here, it's nice to see some familiar faces. Certainly some of you with some experience with this type of engagement and outreach, and I appreciate your participation in the working group. And I really want to acknowledge those that are new to this type of process and let you know that we're really looking forward to hearing your voice and having you participate in our discussion. The housing, right? This is such an important and really challenging topic on so many levels. I imagine and hope that there are a lot of different perspectives from the working group on this issue. And regardless of your particular interests and motivations, I want to encourage each of you to have an open mind and really seek to understand each other's perspective. Our aim here is to create a forum where we can listen and learn from each other and explore creative solutions to this very challenging issue that's before us. I'm confident that we can do it, and I'm really looking forward to working with each of you as we move forward. So thanks again for being here and spending your evenings with us for the next several months. Tim?
Okay, thank you, John, for those remarks. And also, if I could have Rachel and Amy introduce themselves. I know Rachel may be having some technical issues. Okay, great. Rachel, could you please introduce yourself? And then afterwards, Amy, if you could introduce yourself after Rachel, and then I'll go ahead and introduce the core housing element team. So Rachel?
She needs to be promoted.
Oh, she needs
Yeah,
to
I'll go first while she's being promoted.
Okay, thanks, Amy.
Hi, I'm Amy French. I was born in Palo Alto, raised here, and joined the planning department way back in 1998. So I'm a long-standing member of this department, proudly serving the citizens and folks in Palo Alto. And so I'm here for this endeavor. Thank you for including me.
Thank you. My name is Rachel Tanner. I'm the Assistant Director of Planning and Development Services here for the City of Palo Alto. I've been working in this role since June of 2019. So really proud of being part of this great team that we've got here for you all, and very excited. As Jonathan said, a very challenging endeavor, but something that I know that we can tackle together, thinking creatively and really working together and listening to each other. In addition to working overall with the department, I work with Amy French, who oversees our current and long-range planning, and then also with George Hoyt, who oversees our building permitting function. So that's another aspect of our operations that we have here. And I will leave it at that. So it's good to see some familiar faces and some new faces, and look forward to meeting and getting to know you all better soon.
Okay, well, thank you, Rachel and Amy. And once again, I'd like to introduce now the Housing Element Core team, if you will. And again, my name is Tim Wong. I'm the project manager. And then Claire, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah. Hello, everyone. So I'm Claire Campbell, and I'm the manager of the long range planning team. And I will be working very closely with Tim, and we'll definitely be getting to know each other very well over the many months to come as we meet and work on this great project for the city. And it's going to be exciting, hard work, but it's going to be good work that we're going to be doing. So looking forward to it. And Chitra.
Hi, I'm Chitra Moitra. I have been with the city for the last 15 years now, and I have worked on many such projects. So I'm looking forward to working with all of you individually, and you'll see me communicating through emails and responding to your queries. So very excited for this new process to launch. Thank you.
And Della, why don't you go ahead?
Thank you. I'm Della Acosta, and I lead the comprehensive planning services at Raincon Consultants, and I will be the project manager for the consultant team for the housing element update. We're really excited to be working with the city on this endeavor.
Thanks. And Jenna, would you like to say a few words?
Yeah, my name is Jenna Shaw. I work alongside Della at Rincon Consultants, and I will be helping assist with taking the minutes. So I will sort of be in the background taking notes, but I'm happy to help answer any questions if need be.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Jenna. And next slide, please. And so now it's time for you, the working group, to introduce yourselves. And so if each one of you could take a minute and briefly describe why you joined the housing element. And just to make it simple, I will go again alphabetically. And again, if you could just take a minute to introduce yourself and briefly describe, and I'll try to tee up everyone afterwards. But let's go ahead and start with you, Anupa, followed by Sheena.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm a long-term resident of Palo Alto. My name is Anupa Bajwa. My kids were born here, went to school here, and now graduated college. I work locally as well, and I want to bring my head and my heart to this process, and also, increase communication and trust and a level of cooperation that's going to be needed to address this creative challenge that we're facing. So really glad to be on the team and glad to see so many familiar names and faces.
Okay. Thank you, Anupa. Sheena?
Hello, everyone. Sorry you cannot see me because I don't have camera on my computer. I use Mac Mini, so there's no camera at all. Anyway, glad to see you, all of you, and glad to work with you. And this housing project, I think it's very debating, lots of different voices in our community. And I'd like to devote my my part and my efforts to for the next cycle of a housing plan. And glad to work with all of you.
Okay, thank you, Sheena. Aisha, and then followed by Hamilton.
Hi, everyone. I hope you can see me. I'm trying to figure out how to remove this background that I put on. So I hope you can see my face. But I'm Aisha. I've lived in Palo Alto for just under 4 years. I have 3 children who are in the public school system, and we really love it here. And the reason I joined, or at least applied to join, is that I'm very passionate about Palo Alto. We love it here. We came here for just a year when I came to do a fellowship at Stanford, and we decided as a family to make it our long-term home. And I'm very passionate about housing and diversity in our community. And so when I saw this as an opportunity, I wanted to be a part of it if I could. So very excited to be here. I live in downtown, and I look forward to working with everyone.
Okay, thank you. Hamilton?
Hello, my name is Hamilton Hitchings, and I'm going to start with a fun fact. I grew up in the oldest house in Cambridge, Massachusetts, which was built in 1681, and I gave tours as a child. And that's because my parents were caretakers. We were also renters. My parents lived very frugally, and we sometimes struggled to pay the bills, but I have some wonderful childhood memories from that time. When I moved out here as a software engineer, I lived in 3 apartments before eventually buying a house with my fiance in Palo Alto. And that was because we wanted a great place to raise a family and put our kids through the public school system. Subsequent to that, we actually did live in Hong Kong for 2 years, and we were on the 36th floor of an apartment building. Pro tip, don't lean back against all the buttons on the elevator. And more recently, I served on the Citizen Advisory Comp Plan update, where we did all the other elements besides the housing element. I'm really looking forward to hearing all your stories and your great ideas.
Thank you, Hamilton. Next up is Rashawn, and followed by Catherine.
Hello, this is Rashan. As a renter, parent, and a recent immigrant, we are so grateful that we made our home Palo Alto. I have been here 6 years. I would like to share my perspective and experiences, as well as learn more about how housing policy developed.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for sharing, Rashawn. And Catherine.
Yes, hi. Hi, everyone. I'm Kathy Jordan. I'm also a long-time resident in Palo Alto, about 30 years or so. Come from the East Coast originally, and I'm joining because obviously, as you all recognize, this working group will be doing very important work, and housing is a very important element for our city and for all of us who live here. So thank you.
Okay. Arthur and Cheryl are next.
Hi, I'm Arthur Keller, and I am former co-chair of the Citizens Advisory Committee on the Comprehensive Plan. So I co-chaired that. And I was also on before that on the Planning and Transportation Commission for 8 years or so. And I would like to hear all your stories. I feel that we need to forge compromises and consensus, and I'm looking forward to doing that.
Okay, thank you. Cheryl? Cheryl?
Yep,
Okay.
mute button. Hi, I'm Cheryl Klein. I've been a resident of Palo Alto for about 16 years. I too am a transplant from the East Coast. I have 2 children who went through the Palo Alto school systems, and they're grown now. Professionally, I work for Alto Housing, and we are a community-based nonprofit that builds affordable housing here in the Mid-Peninsula area. And I've been very involved in the Wilton Court project that just broke ground in the fall. And it's at the corner of Wilton Avenue and El Camino Real. And I'm thrilled to be serving alongside of you. Housing is a very important issue, and I'm so glad that we're digging into it together.
Okay, thank you, Cheryl. Next up is Ed, followed by Jennifer.
Hey, thanks. Nice to see a lot of faces, and including Jonathan Late. I'll go into my background briefly as a Midwestern transplant. I came out here from Minneapolis, and I was surprised to see how different the weather was from day one. But lived in Menlo Park in a house, got married there, had a kid, and then after my firstborn daughter was 3, my wife said, well, we're moving to Palo Alto. I said, why? This is a good house. Well, the schools are better there. Probably not, but, and the more I talked about it, she said, you don't get it. We're moving to Palo Alto. Well, she grew up in Palo Alto, so she got it, and I didn't. I have gotten it since the day I moved here, and love the city, love, probably most everything about it. But I'm always looking for, maybe because of my Midwestern upbringing, what more can we do? What more can we do? So I pretty early, when the kids got to a reasonable age, got involved in community service here in Palo Alto, and been on commissions, and before that in youth baseball, and before that in homeless. And I'm still on the same plan. It's a great place. What can we do to make it better? Particularly in this instance, there's no question in my mind that we're working on the most crucial issue for Palo Alto, period. And part of the goal here is to improve the kind of number of residents, and also to improve the diversity of residents. So delighted to work on that. I think we got a great group to do it. It's going to be really hard, don't doubt that, but we're going to get there, and I'm really excited about it.
Thanks, Ed. Jennifer?
Hi, I'm Jennifer Liu. I'm from China. I live in Canada for a few years and come to the Bay Area. Have been to a lot of places, and I found that that is the place I really belong. I want to make it my home. I want to retire in Palo Alto. I live in Palo Alto for over 20 years. I raised my 2 sons here. I have a software engineer background, and later, for the past over 10 years, I work on the real estate industry. I love housing, and I want to be part of the workforce to make Palo Alto a better place. I'm excited to work with all of you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer. Pat and Keith.
Okay, I'm Pat Markovich. I am a born and raised Palo Alton, as is my husband and our 2 kids. Our kids went through the Palo Alto school system. I have served on a number of committees, including the Parks and Rec Commission and Infrastructure Commission, and a bunch of working groups. And I was very involved in PTA as well when my kids were going through it. I love Palo Alto. There's so many, I can't tell you how many reasons why I love this place, which is why I wanted to get involved in the housing issue, because I think we should be able to have a more diverse group of people enjoy what I enjoyed growing up.
Thank you, Pat. Keith?
Okay.
Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Keith. I've lived in Palo Alto now for almost 25 years. So time has flown. I'm originally a Midwesterner who came out here also. Thought I'd be here for a few years, and it's been much longer. Like most residents, I really love Palo Alto. It's a great place to live. The people here are just wonderful, high caliber, very active. It's a very stimulating place to live. But during my 25 years here, housing has gone from tight to being very, very tight. It is now, like Ed said, the biggest problem the city has. And I was part of the NVCAP working group and realized how hard it really is. And that was a much smaller problem. The problem we have here is going to be so much more difficult than the North Ventura. So I wanted to join this housing work group and try and chip away at the housing problem.
Okay. Thank you, Keith. And Jean and Jacinia, you guys are up.
Hi, everyone. I'm really looking forward to working with everybody. My name is Jean Snyder, and I work at Stanford University. I actually do not live in Palo Alto. I live in Belmont. I was born and raised in the Bay Area, and have seen the housing prices skyrocket and know the challenge and feel it. I am excited just to listen, to contribute, to share thoughts of a large landowner and employer in the area, and hopefully bring some resources. In my role, the group I oversee manages all of Stanford's lands in Palo Alto, including the research park. I actually started working as the director of the research park 20 years ago and began immediately working on converting some of the sites in the research park to housing, which are now University Terrace and Mayfield Place, an affordable housing project. And my group does oversee the housing development on behalf of the university. So I'm looking forward to participating in problem solving and answering any questions you all have. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Jean. Jacinia?
Hi, everyone. First of all, thank you. It's a great honor to be part of the Housing Element Group. So I was born in Mexico, and I've been here in the US for about 25 years now. For almost 20 years, I live in East Palo Alto, and I applied for low-income housing here in Palo Alto, and I've been living here for about almost 6 years now. I have 3 kids in the Palo Alto School District. One of them is 12 years old, and he's special needs. And so I'm just honored to be part of the group because I would like to bring hopefully my experiences that I've been through, and also hoping that I can make a change in the group. I know that housing has, the cost of housing has gone up, and so I graduated from UC Santa Barbara, and even with a degree, I still live in the low-income housing, and it's just very sorry, my kids are in the background. It's not very easy to purchase a home here, so and I don't think I would move because the schools are great for my kids, especially for the one that's special needs. I know that they provide all of the services that he needs for his disability. He has a cerebral palsy. And so I just love this area. I don't think I would be moving. especially for my kids, because I want them to get a great education. But it can be tough because on one side, I would like to live in my own house, but it's not possible here. And if I go back to East Palo Alto, I don't feel that the schools would provide my kids the quality of education that Palo Alto would bring. So anything that I can bring to the group, I would be happy to do that. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Jasenia. And the last two to go are Randolph and Jessica. So Randolph.
Woohoo, excellent. Nice to meet you, everybody, and seeing familiar faces and seeing everybody healthy. Randolph Chen, I've been here 15 plus years, have 2 kids. One of them the second one graduating from the PAUSD school district. I'm a transplant from the Midwest, from St. Louis, Missouri, the Show Me State. I am a Diplo brat, so I grew up all over the world, living in Thailand, Mexico, Tonga. I identify myself as Tongan, even though I'm Asian from the Far East. And so I see housing from various different views, and involved in the community in various capacities, and would like to do more because Palo Alto is a great place, and look forward to learning from everybody, hearing your opinions, and hopefully I can hear something surprising, because once you have a diverse view from growing up, nothing is that exciting anymore. But anyway, very excited to be here to work with all you guys and have some fun with the housing element and make it work. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, Randolph. And Jessica.
Hey everyone. Well, Randolph, that's a hard act to follow. I love your optimism and I embrace it. I work at Stanford alongside Jean, and I too am not a Palo Alto resident. However, I think the one thing we all do have in common here is that we are residents of the Bay Area, and we all have been touched in some fashion by the housing crisis, and we all are here because it's important. And I really look forward to being a resource and a partner with you all on behalf of Stanford. Palo Alto is our home. We're part of the urban fabric. It's part of our community. And we really look forward to participating in this conversation, being thought leaders together and innovative. And I'm really looking forward to working with you all.
Okay, thank you very much, Jessica. And so thank you for all your introductions and all your great reasons for joining this working group. As many mentioned, that housing has gotten really expensive, and so but I have every confidence in this group that we'll be able to find creative solutions to resolve a lot of these issues that Palo Alto faces. Okay, so again, thank you for all your introductions. Next slide, please, Chitra. Okay, so here's our first presentation of the evening, the introduction to the Brown Act. And so I would like to introduce to you Albert Yang, Assistant City Attorney, who will be presenting about the requirements of the Brown Act. I know this is a lot of information. It's a lot of information and a lot of new information. So we really encourage you to ask questions. If you do have a question, just ask that you hit the raise hand command at the very bottom of the Zoom, and then Albert can call on you if you do have a question. So with that being said, Albert, why don't you take it away?
Thanks, Tim. Yeah, as Tim said, I'm Albert Yang. I'm Assistant City Attorney. I've been working for the city, I guess, 8.5 years at this point. And I've been advising the planning department, maybe about 5 or 6 years. Okay, so can you move on to the next slide, please? We'll talk briefly about the Brown Act. I think there's also some summary information in the handbook, guidebook that Tim prepared. And I guess just to let you know, I will probably not be attending these meetings regularly. I'll be more working in the background with staff, but you are welcome at any time to reach out to me if you have specific questions, and I'll do my best to help out. So the Brown Act, as you probably know, is California's open meeting law, and it's been around for 60 plus years now. And the basic requirement is that all meetings of legislative bodies must be open to the public. And so there are two important pieces of that. The first is, what is a legislative body? And that is obviously something like the city council, as well as standing committees of the council and ongoing boards and commissions in the city. It also includes any decision-making or advisory group that's created by formal action of the city council. So this working group was created by a formal vote of the city council, and as a result, it is subject to the Brown Act just as much as the council itself is. So then the second issue that we need to talk about is what is a meeting? And a meeting is any gathering of a quorum of the body of the working group. And a quorum is basically a majority. So actually, I'm not sure, Tim, how many members in total?
We have 15 members.
Okay.
Yeah.
So a quorum here would be 8 members. So a meeting is any gathering of 8 members of the working group in which they will hear, discuss, or deliberate on any matter that's within the jurisdiction of the working group. So if 8 of you get together to talk about housing in Palo Alto, that would be a meeting of the working group. And as a result, it's got to be open to the public. It's got to be noticed in advance. If you find yourself with, 7 of your colleagues here, it's time for one of you to leave the room. Okay, so next slide, please. So in addition to that basic requirement that meetings of the working group are open to the public, there are a bunch of other requirements. Meetings have to be noticed with an agenda posted at least 72 hours in advance. There's an exception for special meetings and emergency meetings. I think we're unlikely to be using those exceptions for the working groups meeting. So we'll just be sticking with the typical at least 72 hours in advance, having an agenda posted. And then once we do post that agenda, the meeting can't deviate from that. Because if you start talking about subjects that aren't on the agenda, the public, someone who might want to show up and comment didn't know that you were going to be talking about something else, any records that are distributed at these meetings are public records, and they also have to be made available to the public at the same time that the working group receives them. So if you come to a working group meeting and you've got some great handouts that you've prepared, please make sure that you make those available to staff so we can post them online for members of the public to be able to see as well. If we do get back to, as I'm sure we will, a point where we are meeting in person, we'll also then need to make copies of any information that's handed out to the working group to make sure that the public, who's there in person can see the same information at the same time. Okay, so one of the biggest issues that we worry about in terms of Brown Act compliance is accidental meetings, where we inadvertently have a gathering, right, of 8 or more working group members where the housing element work is discussed. And the idea of a gathering includes not only contemporaneous meetings where everyone is in the same place at the same time, where everyone's in a Zoom call at the same time, but also things that happen in sequence in time. So a classic example is an email that gets forwarded from one member to another, And if once it reaches 8 group members' email inboxes, and if it has, you know, the collective thoughts of each of those members on the topic, that is considered what's called a serial meeting. It happens in series. And so that would be a violation of the Brown Act because, you know, the public wasn't advised of, you know, the fact that you were creating this sort of common understanding of or discussion of the topic. So one thing that we do to avoid that, we typically, you know, discourage working group members from emailing the rest of the working group. It's perfectly acceptable to email staff, and that's what we suggest. If you've got something you want to share with the rest of the group, email it to staff, and staff will compile all those things and then send them out at the appropriate time. And when staff does send those things out, they'll typically send them out BCC so that no one can accidentally reply all and create a situation where suddenly, you know, you've got this conversation over email with more than a quorum of the group again. And as noted on the slide here, one of the things that can happen with a reply all is that, you know, anyone who doesn't reply first basically can be prevented from sharing their thoughts because you know, the more people who share their thoughts, the closer you get to this, you know, collective discussion of 8 people. So it's actually, you know, it's a little bit harder because this group is so large to get to that 8-person threshold, but with smaller groups in the city, you know, with ARB, for example, that has 5 members, you know, if someone sends out an email and then 2 people respond, the other 2 members of the, no, actually, if someone sends out an email and 1 other ARB members respond, no one else can speak to the issue because that would be 3 people sharing their thoughts and that would be a quorum. But just as a general rule, even though this is a much larger group than that, you know, it's something we discourage. Okay. So that's the end of what I have prepared, but I'm happy to answer any questions if you have.
Okay, any questions?
Yes.
Hi.
Okay.
I have a question. Albert, do you have any example of the past housing element panel having an email serial meeting?
No, that's actually something that we have thankfully avoided with our boards and commissions and working groups because, you know, everyone has typically followed our advice, which is to send your thoughts to staff, and then staff will manage kind of the dissemination of that information. Okay, yeah, Aisha, it looks like you got a question as well.
Yeah, it was basically what you just said. So I wanted to just make sure. Basically, never ever reply all is what you're saying.
Yeah, and we typically will try to not even give you that option.
Okay,
yeah.
So just never do that. Okay.
Arthur.
Yes, can the co-chairs communicate among themselves?
Yeah, so, you know, as long as you're under that threshold of, I guess in this case, 8 members, you know, you can have, you know, smaller group conversations. I guess one thing to watch out for, I guess, is if you, for example, have a series of individual conversations with, you know, individual colleagues, you have to be careful that you're not transferring information from one to the other, right? So you can have one-way communications or one-on-one communications, but when you get into a situation where someone says, oh, you know, I heard from Arthur and Ed that they're thinking, you know, that we should really place a lot of housing on this parcel. The fact that you're sharing their thoughts kind of brings them into the conversation with whoever you're talking to, and that would then be considered, you know, a deliberation among 4 of the members. So yeah, I guess beyond replying all, try not to reply all in the real world, or kind of share forward other people's thoughts in the real world. Any other questions?
And I would just add, if as things go along, you have a question or you're nervous you're going to violate the Brown Act or something, just reach out to Tim and or Albert, and we can help you. So don't think that you have to remember it all today. We're here as a resource to help you if you have any questions.
Thank you, Rachel.
Oh, so I did have one other example that I thought might be helpful to share. In general, it's also perfectly fine to speak with members of the public or members of staff. The only thing that the Brown Act really prohibits is again that quorum, that a group of 8 or more working members, speaking amongst themselves. But much like the example I just gave, with a member talking about what they heard from someone else, it's entirely possible for a member of the public to, unbeknownst to you, be polling a bunch of your colleagues. And if you get into a conversation where a member of the public is indicating that, or trying to tell you what one of your other colleagues says, one of your other colleagues thinks on an issue, that's something where you'd want to just stop them and say, I'm sorry, I can't talk about this, because that would be sharing information and potentially creating a meeting outside of an actual formal meeting.
Okay. Any other questions?
Okay.
Okay.
Well, yeah, again, as Rachel said, feel free to reach out with any questions or concerns that come up.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks, Albert, for that presentation. And just last call for questions about the Brown Act. Albert won't be with us, I don't think, the entire meeting. So now's your chance if you have any final questions. But again, feel free to reach out to me with any Brown Act question. So, okay. Thank you very much, Albert.
Sorry, Randolph, do you have another question? Yeah.
So is this meeting, this is introduction orientation, or this will become public too, this meeting, this particular one?
This is a noticed meeting of the working group. We gave notice and we had an agenda for what we're going to do today. Yeah, this is a formal meeting and it's being broadcast right now.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Albert. All great questions. And by all means, whatever questions, just keep them coming. So, okay, next slide. Pop quiz time. Didn't think you would slide through the whole entire presentation without participation. So here we go. Email communication among advisory members relative to advisory board business is strongly A, encouraged, B, discouraged, C, ignored, D, all of the above. So working group, what do you think? A, B, C, or D?
B.
B.
Discouraged.
Discouraged, yeah.
B. Discouraged.
B. Okay. All right. Very good. Ice cream sundaes for the group. Good job. But also just want to follow up in all seriousness, why? Why are emails discouraged? Go ahead, Pat.
It can be considered a serial meeting.
Yes, very good. And just want to just reinforce that fact about, if you will, the seriousness of email exchanges. So very good. Okay, great. Next slide, please. And so now we'll have Della provide an overview of the Housing Element 101. And just to let you know, after Della's presentation, we will be taking a short break. But again, we encourage questions, and please use the raise hand function if you have any questions to ask Della. So Della, why don't you go ahead and take it away?
Yeah, thank you, Tim. So yeah, let's start by just talking about the housing element itself. And some of you may know a little bit more about this than others, but I'm just gonna kind of break it down to the simple basics so that everyone's at the same starting place. Go ahead and next slide. So the housing element is one of the 8 mandatory elements in the city's comprehensive plan, which is the long-term development plan for the city of Palo Alto. And it sounds like at least a couple of you were involved in the city's comprehensive plan update, which is fantastic. So you already have an idea of what goes into those updates and the comprehensive plan itself. The housing element is governed by the California Government Code, as is the comprehensive plan itself. However, unlike most of the rest of the comp plan, the housing element is required to be updated every 8 years, and it does have to be certified by the State Department of Housing and Community Development, or HCD. The certification deadline for jurisdictions in our region, which is the ABAG region, like Palo Alto, is January 31st, 2023. So one of our biggest goals is to ensure that the housing element is complete, adopted, and certified by January 31st, 2023. Next slide. The housing element identifies adequate sites in the city for future housing that could be developed in the next 8 years so that the city meets its share of the regional housing need for all segments of the community. It also includes programs and policies to promote housing opportunities for all, and it meets other specific requirements that are needed to be certified by HCD. So I'm gonna just pause here and clarify that the housing element identifies sites where housing is allowed to be developed. Because the city is not in the business of building housing, it's the private developers and occasionally nonprofits that do that. This does not guarantee that housing will be built on these sites. It also does not require that housing is built on these sites. The housing element facilitates development by developers through removing barriers to housing, to building housing, and allowing housing to be built in different areas. Next slide. The housing element covers the 4 broad categories that you see here. And I know that text is really small. Sorry about that. The needs assessment includes the development of a community profile, including socioeconomic demographics and housing stock characteristics, and it allows for the analysis of existing and projected housing needs in the city. The housing element also includes a look at various governmental, market, and environmental constraints to housing to determine where barriers might exist to building housing. It must also provide information on housing resources across the city, including the identification of sites that can be used for future residential development in order to meet the RHNA requirement, which we will talk more about in just a minute. It also includes financial and administrative resources like grants and other funding opportunities. And finally, the housing element provides an implementable plan for the 8-year planning period. This includes the development of goals, policies, and programs that support the plan for housing. Resources to achieve these goals, like federal resources and state financing that's available to builders and cities looking to finance those residential projects, is also identified in the housing element. So going back to constraints and resources, because this is one of the first things that we'll start looking at for the housing element and a very important piece of it. What are some examples that you guys can think of right off the bat for, let's start with constraints to building housing in Palo Alto? Any takers? I'm sure you can think of lots of them.
Land.
Availability of land?
They're not making any more of it.
Okay, that's a really good one.
Yeah, if it's in a flood zone.
Okay, so that would be an environmental constraint, right?
Yeah.
Natural hazard risk.
Palo Alto's already built out.
Okay, yeah. What about governmental constraints? I'm really curious to know what you guys think about that one. Not to put Tim on the spot there, but.
Do you mean governmental constraints on housing?
Yeah, so if someone wants to submit an application to build housing on a site, what barriers might they encounter in submitting their application and getting that housing built on the government side?
The cost of the impact fees that were recently just raised, for example.
Okay. How about resources? Can anyone think of any resources that are available in Palo Alto that would help build housing?
Impact fees for affordable housing.
Okay, so that can be both a constraint and a resource.
Is it a major constraint to people's ability to afford to have a house in Palo Alto?
So I think that would go under market constraints. Well, I guess that would be more availability of housing. So I think that's more of a result than an actual constraint.
I wasn't able to hear the comment. Would you mind repeating it?
My question was, isn't a major constraint people's inability to afford housing in Palo Alto?
Yeah, so we're mostly looking at constraints to building housing. And I think the high affordability is more of a result of not being able to build housing. Ed, it looks like you have your hand up. Oh, you're on mute, Ed.
On the review process.
I was going to just comment that the city has made some strides in the housing improvement program, for example, to kind of open up other options for developers, sort of a contra to the resource to the constraints. And also, of course, we have a very, in comparison to other cities in the state, we have a very liberal ADU program, which opens up a lot of units that also do count for RENA allocations and do count for getting people to be able to live here, and they're generally more affordable. So a couple of examples of what we've kind of collectively accomplished in the last sort of 3 years.
Okay, great. Yeah. Sorry,
I think someone had shared an idea that we just before Ed, I couldn't hear what they said. If that person wants to repeat it, was it you, Jennifer? Maybe.
Yeah, Jennifer.
Yes, I have something. If the city can make it faster for the review process
The review process.
Yeah, the review process is long and it's slow. If the feedback can be much faster, then the cycle will be shorter. It's easier for builders to build houses.
Yeah, time and the time it takes for reviewing permits is certainly a constraint on the getting shovels in the ground and units built.
Yeah. Okay, fantastic. We got a good list going already. All right, let's move on to the next slide. So the objectives of the housing element. There's a few different objectives to keep in mind while we're preparing the updated housing element. First, the housing element will provide adequate planning to accommodate housing needs for all socioeconomic segments of the community. It will assist the development of housing that's affordable to lower and moderate income households. It will remove governmental barriers to housing development. It will preserve and improve existing affordable housing. And you're probably seeing a trend at this point. It will ensure equal housing opportunity for all residents in Palo Alto. Meeting these objectives in the housing element are legislative requirements of the housing element in order for it to be certified by HCD. So we have to show that we're doing these things in the element in order for HCD to approve it at the end of the day. So I am going to pause here, and I'll do this a few times throughout my presentation because I'm going to be throwing a lot of really technical information. Perfect. And that's Arthur, I see you have a question. So I'm going to pause here. If anyone has any clarifying questions specifically on the technical info that I'm providing,
Okay.
or wanting to know, things that we should dive deeper into in future meetings, I'm going to pause and get that feedback.
I'd like to know whether whether the housing that exists on so the Hoboken housing has to be retained, such as affordable housing in Terminal Place.
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
I want to know whether housing. One second. I'd like to know whether affordable housing has to be retained in somebody's calling me. Stop it. It's gonna.
Okay.
I'd like to know whether affordable housing has to be retained in such as Terminal Place housing.
If it has to be retained in
Such
a
as
certain place.
such as Terminal Place housing, that's affordable housing there. What happens if it expires and it doesn't get renewed, and people gets how do you retain affordable housing?
So we do have to plan for a certain amount of affordable housing and low income units. And there is a no net loss law to affordable housing. I'm not entirely sure on when it expires, but I know the overall number of low income units has to be a certain number. So my answer to that would be if the city loses some low income units, then those do need to be replaced during this cycle.
I think I would add to, Arthur's question, I think also brings to mind that depending on how a building is constructed, the covenant to have the housing remain affordable could expire. And so at those times, that's something that we can put into our policy section to make sure we're tracking when those expirations are happening, because there are steps cities can take to try to maintain the affordability of those units. So that's a good note for our policy section.
Yeah, just to also add on that, as part of the entire housing element and the needs assessment, we do identify high risk or those affordable units that could be subject to expiring covenants or those type of things, and can be addressed through housing programs also to try to preserve the affordability of those identified developments. So. Yeah.
Great. Thank you, guys. Okay. Any other questions, comments, or things that we would like to cover in more depth in future meetings? No? All right. I will keep going then. Next slide. Oh, I'm sorry, Randolph, I think you said you had.
What does expiring mean? I read through the documentation suggested before the meeting, but I don't understand what that expired means.
Regarding the affordable housing that we were just talking about?
Yes.
So affordable housing units only have to remain affordable for usually a certain term, and then they can revert to market rate.
Yeah, and just to expand on that, generally, affordable housing developments are affordable for generally about 55 years, 30 to 55 years. And so whenever the housing development was constructed, so usually 30 to 55 years after it's been occupied, those covenants will expire. And then, like Della said, they can revert to market rate after that time.
And who benefits from the market rate? Does the person who occupied that for 30 to 50 years go, oh, woohoo, I struck it rich, I can sell it and move on? Or the city kicks back, or how does that work?
Well, it depends on if it's a rental or ownership, but I'll be more than happy to talk to you offline about the city's rental covenants and ownership covenants also. So, but if it is a subject of interest for the entire group, we can certainly have that as a discussion item also in the future.
Yeah, I think you're going to need to cover it.
That's very interesting. Yeah.
Okay, very good. We'll make a point to talk about covenants and more specifically, maybe the city's affordability or a below market rate program also and covenants. Okay, very good. Thanks.
Perfect. Kathy?
Yes, Jella, I see that this is housing element objectives, which is part of what's required, right, of cities. So will you also, as part of this sort of regulatory review, be covering penalties that may be applied to the city or accrue if the city doesn't meet, these goals and all these various requirements that are set out for a city to meet? Will you be covering all those types of things as well in this regulatory regime that?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. So later in the presentation, I will cover what happens if the city does not have a certified housing element. And then our next month's meeting will actually we'll go much more in depth into the housing legislation and in general housing element law.
Thank you.
Randolph?
Sorry, one more question. I probably use up all my quota. So we are talking about socioeconomic segments. What about the school district, transportation, maybe environmental, solar? Is that part of our objective? Because somebody cannot just buy a affordable housing and not worry about the rest, or that may be impacting the whole school district, because some of the school district meetings, people come into the school district, great schools, but sometimes they do well, sometimes they don't do so well. How does that interact with each other?
So as part of this process, we will be doing, an environmental review, which will cover what you mentioned with traffic and other environmental impacts. And that is simply an informative document about what impacts may occur as a result of the development because of the housing element policies and site selections. Schools are actually not something that we look at, because from the state's perspective, if it will be an impact to schools, then the solution is to build more schools. So we're actually not allowed to consider that.
Okay, electrification, electrical vehicles, carbon footprint.
That is something we cover in the environmental report. Yes.
Thank you.
And I think maybe part of what may be important to mention, not to cut you off, Della, is that there are, at least in kind of how I think about the housing element, there's like kind of two pieces. And an important part is our policies piece as well, which really kind of sets out for the city what the work program is for the department to be working on to help advance housing. So there's certainly things we can do to select sites where we want the housing to go. But, some of the things you're mentioning, Randolph, might be part of the policy. So how to make sure the housing that we build is energy efficient or, helps to contribute to our GHG targets, things like that can be part of that section as well. So these are really good ideas, and we're capturing them, and they can be part of that section as well.
Right. And I'll also put a reminder in that this is part of the comprehensive plan. And a lot of these things were probably covered as part of the land use element in the comprehensive plan as well. So.
Thank you, Rachel. Yeah, because I'm thinking if we're building this could be a showcase for some of the new things the whole entire city of Palo Alto is doing, and just put it in there so that we have something that's already there and that's going to plan for 10 years. That's on the more public side than versus more private residential stuff. Thank you for the feedback. Look forward to more.
Great, thank you. All right, next slide. Did we skip one, or is that the next slide? I think that is, okay. All right, so now we're going to talk about RHNA, the Regional Housing Needs Assessment. So RHNA is a mandated process by the state, and the assessment is aimed at quantifying housing needs through a particular region. It sets the number of how many housing units need to be accommodated based on the expected growth in the region. RHNA is used in the local planning process to address future housing needs resulting from population, employment, and household growth. As mentioned previously, the RHNA process looks at an 8-year planning process. The city is currently in what's referred to as the 5th cycle. So the 6th cycle covers the next planning period, which is why you may hear this housing element update referred to as the 6th cycle housing element update. The planning period for this update will extend from January 2023, which is the deadline for certification, through January 2031. Kathy, I see you have a question. You're on mute.
Yes, sorry. How dated are I think I've read this, but I'm sorry I'm asking this. So how dated are these numbers about population and such that are being used or have been used? You know, we have seen that population has been declining in California overall, and in some regions. And so I'm just wondering how dated these numbers might be.
The methodology report is still being finalized. So the numbers are, as far as when they started their process, I'm not 100% clear on that, and I apologize for that, but they are still finalizing the numbers. Or I'm sorry, the numbers are set, they're finalizing their methodology. Jenna, actually, do you mind looking that up really quick?
Yeah, let me see what I can find.
Thank you. I think, I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce your name.
Hamilton Hitchens?
Aisha?
Sorry.
Aisha, thank you.
Yeah, I'll change it. It has my full name, Aisha. It was a very similar question to Kathy I was going to ask, but I was looking at the previous document, and I think it had information up until 2010. And so I wanted to also know about, you know, whether we get, 2019 data, but also do we get to work with or get some reports that look at projecting where we think, since this is a look forward document, is anybody preparing analysis on where we think population growth in Palo Alto is going, so that we can make we can provide a policy that's actually focused on reality as opposed to working with something that may not be.
So I have two parts to answer that. My first part is, as far as the population projections were done as part of the comp plan update, so that will include population projections for Palo Alto. The second part of my answer, though, is that the RENA allocation is, and I will explain this in just a second, and the slide kind of starts to describe this. The RENA allocation is handed down from the state to be allocated to each region, and it's not something that we really have any control over. Hamilton.
Do you know what the Planned Bay Area 2050 estimated population was? I was trying to find it online. I couldn't find
Not
it.
off the top of my head, unfortunately. I can tell you where the plan is, but I don't have the actual population number off the
Is
top.
that something you could look up and maybe send to us at some point?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
I'll be happy to get that. You know, the city is working with ABAG, the Association of Bay Area Governments, and this whole methodology still. And so I can get you that. I can get the working group that information.
Thank you.
I'll send it off. Yeah.
Yes, please. That'll be great.
Kathy, to answer your question, I'm still trying to find the exact year of data that they used to pull together their arena numbers, but I did hunt down ABAG's proposed arena methodology that is chock full of information. So I think that's something that we can pass on your way after the meeting, and that may give you a lot of information as to how it was formulated.
Okay, thank you.
I definitely think that methodology will answer a lot of questions, and we will probably go much more in depth into the methodology when we start, you know, in future meetings. Okay. So next slide. So the RENA objectives are to increase the housing supply and the mix of housing types, tenure, and affordability for the region. It's to promote infill development, socioeconomic equity, and promote the protection of environmental and agricultural resources, to encourage efficient development and development patterns and GHG reductions, to improve the jobs housing balance, and to achieve regional housing balance by income levels, and to affirmatively further fair housing, which is a topic we will also go very deep into in a future meeting. Cheryl, yes.
Can you explain what GHG reductions are?
Greenhouse gas emissions. Yes, so the greenhouse gas emissions mostly from building energy usage, natural gas in buildings, and vehicle miles traveled from gas vehicles.
Thank you.
Yes. And sorry about that, about the jargon there. All right, next slide. So this will kind of go into the question asked earlier about how these numbers come about with population projections. So the RHNA process starts at the state level with HCD. And once the state has determined the RHNA allocation, they will issue that allocation to the regional government, which for the Bay Area is ABAG, the Association of Bay Area Governments. ABAG is then tasked with creating a methodology, which Jenna was referencing, to distribute those units across the Bay Area region. This methodology has to be approved by HCD, and those unit numbers are then provided to each jurisdiction within ABAG. So all of the 9 counties and every city within the 9 counties. Each city and county then must prepare a housing element that provides for that future development of the RHNA allocation set forth by ABAG. So to kind of reiterate that, HCD determines the statewide need for housing, distributes the number of housing units needed in each metropolitan area to its regional government. ABAG, our regional government, allocates the regional distribution to the cities and counties in the Bay Area based on their approved methodology. And then the city of Palo Alto decides how and where to allow housing units that meet their allocation. Cheryl, did you have another question or was your hand still up? Okay. All right, next slide. Another pop trivia. Does anyone know what the RHNA allocation for this upcoming housing element cycle is? This information was pretty wild.
6,086.
See, all right, yes, correct. It is 6,086 units. So that is the number of housing units that we are tasked with finding places to allow for in Palo Alto.
And another trivia fact, D is what we currently have in our current cycle. So you can kind of see those differences there on the screen.
And the next slide also shows this. Yeah, so the top row is the current cycle. So what Palo Alto's current numbers are. And the bottom one is the 6th cycle allocation. So this is what we'll be planning for this housing element update. Palo Alto's allocation is a total of 6,086 units. To compare that with, just to put it in context with some of your neighbors, that is lower than Sunnyvale, which has a RHNA of about 12,000 units, but it is higher than Cupertino, which has around 4,600 units. Palo Alto's 6,086 units were allocated across multiple income categories, which you'll see the distinction between each category here on the screen. 1,556 units are allocated to the very low income category, 896 to the low income category, 1,013 units to the moderate income category, and 2,621 to the above moderate income category. Sheena, I think I saw your hand first.
I think it's Cheryl.
I thought I saw Sheena.
Oh.
Did I? Maybe I was wrong.
I was just gonna, can you explain what very low, low, and moderate mean?
Yeah, so basically they take the AMI, the median income, correct me if I'm wrong, of Palo Alto. And
the county.
Sorry?
Of the county, average median income of the county.
This is specific to Palo Alto.
No.
But we still use it for county. We use Santa Clara County median income. Median.
Oh, do you? Okay.
Yes, yes. It's based on Santa Clara County.
Okay.
Thank you for the clarification.
Thank you then. So it is for the county. So they take the median income for the county and it's a percentile of that.
Yes, I'd like to know about what does this number mean to this group?
So that means that when we start looking at site selection for, and again, this is something we'll go into in far deeper detail in a future meeting. But when we start looking at site selection for what housing units can be accommodated on what sites, we have to consider these numbers. These numbers have to be accommodated for these income groups. So we have to have 1,556 units that are affordable to the very low income group, 896 that are affordable to the low income group. And there's some parameters around this, and we'll go deeper into detail in a future meeting on that.
Yeah, but the thing is that when you see the 5th cycle and 6th cycle, you can see that for the 6th cycle, it almost 3 times larger than the 5th cycle. So this is kind of mission, which is, I think personally, it's difficult to reach. So what if we cannot fulfill the estimated number?
So you are correct. These numbers are really high compared to the last cycle. And that is something we're seeing all across California, that cities are looking at numbers that are much higher than the last cycle. So Palo Alto is certainly not alone in that. And there are a variety of techniques that can be used to reach that number. So we're really confident that we can reach that number. It just means we may need to be more creative and more open-minded about the site selection.
But the thing is, what if we are not able to reach that number?
If we can't reach that number, then the housing element doesn't get certified.
Failure in that regard is not an option.
Isn't there a room that for us to work things around? If we're not able to make like a 6,000, so what kind does it have to be approved if it's over 6,000? If it's less than 6,000, then the whole plan will not be approved. Is that what you're saying?
Basically, yes, we do have to reach that number. And like I said, there are many methods to be able to do that. So we're pretty confident we can, I mean, not pretty confident, we are confident that we can reach that number.
So what about the 5th cycle? The 5th cycle is 1,988. So what number did the 5th cycle accomplish?
Tim, do you have?
Yeah, I can send, we have to report annually on our progress towards the regional housing needs assessment. So
I don't think that was the question. I think the question was, did our current housing element, did we find the appropriate sites to reach the 1,988 units? And I believe that we did. And we even, I think, had a little bit extra, which is something we can explain about having, you need to kind of actually have a bit more than the required sites in order to ensure you can accommodate the units within the time frame. And we're very fortunate that Tim worked on that housing element, our last one that we're currently in. So if you do have questions about it, he is actually the one with the answers. But Tim's also saying he can report on our actual production of where we are at this point in our current housing cycle, if you're interested.
Yes, because the materials that I read, I don't know if we meet the 1,988 units for the last cycle. So what I worry about is that it's almost 3 times bigger than last time. And we don't have enough available land. And how can we reach 6,086 units for the next cycle? I think this is very challenging for this group. So I just want to find out, what if we cannot make it 6,000, more than 6,000 units for next cycle? And what will it become, and what kind of consequence it would be?
So I'll take that. You know, I think that you're right. It is a difficult challenge. It's a large hurdle that we need to address or overcome. But we will plan for the RENA numbers that are assigned to us. And at this point, we're looking at 6,086. I want to make a distinction between the planning effort, which we are undertaking here, and our actual need to, it's one thing to plan for it, but we're not in the business of building it. That's where we look to nonprofit organizations and the market. So as Della has been saying in her presentation, one, we got to plan for it. Two, we need to make sure that we don't have any constraints that would restrict somebody from being able to build to those numbers. But if we plan and we don't achieve the numbers, like you're saying, Sheena, with respect to the current housing cycle, we've still, on one hand, we've done our job. We need to plan for the ability to build those units. But if the market doesn't produce them, we're not also in the business of building the housing. So, and as Della noted before, or that she'll talk about this, it really is not an option to not have a certified housing element. I really want to underscore that. So we do need to plan for the number of units and do what we can to see how many can get built. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I also think it might head off a few questions if we skip to the next slide, because I think a lot of questions that are coming I'm actually about to cover. So let's just put the next slide up and then I'll take a couple more questions. Okay. Arthur.
The very low, and moderate income and above moderate, what percentages are they? Are the median income, are they? What percentages are they? First of all. Second of all, we don't have to actually build the housing, but if the site doesn't get built, we can carry it over under certain circumstances. Explain those circumstances.
Yeah, let me pull up really quick. Very low income is less than 50% of the AMI. Low income is 50 to 80% of the AMI. Moderate income is 80 to 120% of the AMI, and above moderate is 120% of the AMI.
We can send out those tables. They just updated the income tables for the county, I think 2 weeks ago.
What does the income table will say that's for family of four?
I believe
Right
it was
now, for a family of four, it's about 150,000.
Approximately.
correct.
Okay, Hamilton, you've had yours
Yeah, I
up.
thought I heard someone say that we've met all our housing allocation for the last RENA cycle. And I was under the impression that we were overachieving on market rate and underachieving on all the below market. So I'd like a very clear clarification on where we are on each of those categories for the current cycle. If you don't have it now, maybe you can provide it in the next meeting.
I can provide that to you as part of our annual progress report that will show the exact numbers for each of those income categories up to last year.
Thank you. But in general, are we on track to meet our below income for the current RENA cycle?
No, we're on pace for market, but not the other lower income categories.
Correct.
And how much below like I thought it was 10 or 15%. I mean, I didn't think it was like close.
It's not close. I don't have the exact percentages, but we're not close.
Thanks. I think that clarification was really helpful to the group.
And again, under the current housing cycle, it got certified. We identified where we could build, the almost 2,000 units. But what we're seeing now is they're not getting built. So one of the things that we're going to want to ask ourselves through this process is, why isn't it getting built? Are there constraints now that are not having us achieve this even lower number? And what do we need to do when we're now stretching even further? I want to also acknowledge, and I think Dell mentioned this as well, but we're not, Palo Alto is not unique in this regard, right? A lot of jurisdictions are meeting their market rate units, but a lot of them are failing to meet the lower income units. And there's a lot of reasons for that we can get into. So I don't want the working group to think that, Palo Alto is unique in that regard. It's a regional and statewide, frankly, worldwide challenge, I think, that we're all dealing with.
Kathy?
I just wanted to remark that Sheena brought up what I thought was a good point to note about the difference between the 5th cycle and the 6th cycle, and the vast difference in what looks like required planning, 2,000 to 6,000, for example. And what Mr. Late's comments to me sounded as though we're sort of marching within what some people might say is a straitjacket of some sort. I assume, and there is controversy about this RENA methodology and how the allocation was done, and the counting of these numbers. Will that be, I assume that won't be discussed, but I'm wondering, will it at all come up in your presentation? Thank you.
Sorry, Dale, I'll jump in there. I just wrote a staff report this afternoon or with Tim and a number of folks on our team on this very issue. And so I'll plug an item that's now posted on the city's website. On May 18th, the city council will consider a policy discussion as to whether or not they want to appeal the what we anticipate will be the RENA numbers for Palo Alto. And so the report shares our analysis in that regard and tees up 2 options for the city council: either proceed with an appeal or not. And I won't spoil it for you. I'll let you read it.
And just a quick explanation of, yeah, our numbers are much higher because as part of it, the state did change the formula in regards to calculating, which has been questioned, if you will, by jurisdictions also, because they did fold in other considerations. Della is correct, talk about population projection, but this time they accounted for overcrowding situations and those who are cost burdened. And that's why these numbers are higher, much higher than previous RENAs also. But I just wanted to point that out to the group also. But sorry, go ahead.
Okay. Not seeing any other hands up now, so I will continue. That's a great discussion, though. I really am appreciating the conversation and the discussion and the thoughtful comments and questions. I really am enjoying that. And a lot of this we will dig much, much deeper into in future meetings, I promise. So how will the city address the RENA allocation? So I can describe the methodology at this point of how we'll start tackling this. Of course, we don't know the ultimate answer right now. If we did, then we wouldn't be here. But how we will start to look at this is, first we will take a look at pending and approved projects, which is actually not on that slide, but residential development projects that have an application on file at the city or have been approved but have not yet pulled the permits by July 1st of this year can be counted towards the RENA allocation. Next, we will be evaluating sites across the city that have appropriate residential zoning designations and can accommodate residential development by each of those income categories. We can include sites that we used in the last couple of housing element update cycles where housing was not built. There are some caveats attached to that, but we can include those sites. Sometimes rezoning is required in order to meet the RENA allocation. And if that is required, then we look at commercial and industrial sites first, then multifamily housing sites before we start considering single family housing. And single family housing sites in Palo Alto already allow for 3 with the ADU allowances. We will identify as a group. We will look at the sites that we think are most appropriate for this level of density in order to meet the RENA. And we'll also take a look at the accessory dwelling unit or ADU production, development constraints on housing development, and new housing legislation to see if we can improve any processes to allow for more housing. And we'll review the city's housing programs and policies to see where they can be improved and ensure that they are meeting the needs of all Palo Alto's residents. So I know we just had a really great conversation, but I have in my notes to check in again here. So are there any questions again, or things that we want to make sure to cover in our next couple of meetings that we maybe didn't cover before. Okay. All right, so next slide. And here's the big one. What happens if the housing element is not certified? So failing to meet the state requirements by not having a certified housing element does have significant penalties. Given the housing crisis in California, the state legislature introduces new laws each year that increase and expand the penalties for noncompliance and impose limitations on local controls affecting housing production. As mentioned earlier, state law does require a jurisdiction to update their housing element on an 8-year cycle, consistent with the region's RENA application. Failing to achieve that certification by HCD's deadline, again, January 31st, 2023, results in the jurisdiction having to update their housing element on a 4-year cycle instead of an 8-year cycle. So we would have to do this twice as often. Assembly Bill 72 gives HCD the authority to refer the violation of the law to the state attorney general. Also, another Assembly Bill 101, jurisdictions failing to timely adopt a local housing element may be fined tens of thousands of dollars per month until HCD determines compliance. And in addition, failure to certify a housing element can result in the jurisdiction's entire general plan, or in Palo Alto's case, the comprehensive plan, being deemed legally inadequate and invalid. And that leaves the city open to litigation regarding the validity of any land use decision the city makes. And finally, jurisdictions that do not have an approved HCD certified housing element are not eligible for grant funding for a wide variety of housing, community development, and infrastructure projects. Next slide. Go ahead, Cheryl.
Do we know what the magnitude of the state funding that is at risk here if this is not certified? Do we know kind of roughly what that amounts to?
I couldn't put a direct dollar amount because it depends on the jurisdiction, but I will say that the vast majority of my work lately has been these grants. So it would probably be in the neighborhood of billions of dollars for Palo Alto.
Thank you.
Yes, over the housing cycle. So this is a look at the timeline.
I'm sorry, I couldn't find my mute button there. Not billions of dollars for Palo Alto.
Oh, so, sorry. Yes.
I just wanted to make sure I got that out there. I might suggest that, Cheryl, it's probably less than the penalties that the would be assessed. I think we would have it'd be more detrimental to be fined than any benefit that we would receive from grant money through the program, let alone loss of our ability to issue permits if we didn't have a certified housing element. Does that sound about right, Della?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the grant funding is definitely a hit, but it's definitely the other ones that are the biggest deal to cities. Okay, so this is a look at the timeline for the housing element update, and keep in mind this is just illustrative. We will be having more detailed timelines as we get closer to each milestone. Go ahead, Hamilton.
Yeah, I'm going to keep harping on this. I just worry, first of all, this is a very high level project plan. It's very hard for us to understand the detail. So given that I already understand that, I'm just going to continue to harp on my point that I really worry when something is due in December and the last time it's in front of the council is November. Also, when I looked at, I just don't think there's no slack. And if the council doesn't like enthusiastically endorse it, then that means there's no chance for rework. And more importantly, like what I'm sort of trying to figure out as well, we submit it to HCD, we put it out for community engagement, we get all this community feedback, and then we put it in front of the council to approve. I just don't see second cycle. And again, I know this is a very high level project, but I don't see that second cycle where we take all that community feedback, run it through our group and the PTC and the council, come up with a final version, and then put that in front of the council. I know that's a lot to do, but
We have the same concerns. So what you don't see at this high level view are the check-in points with both the council ad hoc committee, with the PTC, and with the council. So because this is one slide trying to capture every line item, it's not that detailed, but we can also provide a more kind of detailed schedule that we can show that you could look at, more in a zoomed in version, literally on your screen or at home in paper, that does show those touch-in points. We have several even this year and then going into next year, because yes, we don't want to get to the end of the thing and realize, oops, we've got a lot of changes to make. So it's a good catch, and we feel the same way.
Thank you, Rachel. I appreciate that.
And just for the for all the group to know, thank you very much, Hamilton. We discussed it on our one-on-ones, but we will be taking various segments of the housing element to both the PTC and the city council at various stages. So they won't, either of the bodies won't be seeing the whole document at the last minute, but they'll consistently along the entire process. Both the PTC and the council will be informed and do formal reviews of the housing element. So
thank you.
Right.
Randolph?
A dumb question. Some of these high-level documents, can this be created into a public folder for the panel members to review the detailed ones, so that instead of sending out via emails, we go in there and look at it, and then we can study it, read it, review it, and then maybe submit questions ahead of time, and then have a meeting, be more productive? And I don't know, just thinking out loud.
I think we can take a look at that, how to provide documents. We'll have to take a look at, what's a way to provide it in an organized way that doesn't create any violation to the Brown Act temptation. But I certainly can appreciate having one place you go to have all the files can make it easy when you're kind of trying to look for a bunch of documents. So we can take a look at what we can do.
Thank you.
I have a question about assembling those documents. If they're already publicly available and you're just consolidating them and putting in one place, is that considered a Brown Act issue or not?
No, that's not an issue. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
It was more just thinking about if folks, I think it's just trying to figure out what the best system would be to share, but then also let people have it be their own version of it, or versus a public version that, well, if I make a comment on it, then it's suddenly changing it for everyone's version. So if it's just a document or a folder of PDFs, I think it's pretty fine. But if it's other types of files, it could be a little challenging. So.
Okay, thank you.
And Keith, if you have any particular documents that you would like to review that you aren't accessible, we'll be happy to take those published documents and put them on the website. Again, if you have a particular document in mind, be happy to provide them for the entire group. Yeah.
In fact, can I just make a plug there too? This is an area where the working group can really help us make sure that we've got a robust website. If there's a document that you think we need or that the members of the community would find beneficial, please let us know. We're happy to populate our website. We want it to be a resource for not just you, but the community. And sometimes us as professionals, looking at this stuff day to day, we may not think to upload a document. So we'd really look to you to help us, help us take a step back and make sure that we're providing information that is useful to the public.
Arthur?
I want to make sure that when this stuff goes on the website, the website doesn't get deleted in a few years. Websites can, the last time we had a comprehensive plan, the website got deleted and all the deliberation got destroyed and disappeared in thin air.
Yeah. Understood. Nobody wants their work to be destroyed or lost. I can't make any future promises, but I guarantee you it'll be there through this through this endeavor. But I hear you. Arthur, there's an archive assignment for us.
Keith?
I noticed the environmental assessments and then also SEIR is listed. You want to talk about what's covered in those?
Yeah, so the environmental assessments are going to cover kind of looking at impacts that the potential development would have on resources like bio, noise, traffic. There's a lot of other ones that I'm sure I'm blanking on right now, but we can definitely send out a list. And the SEIR is a supplemental environmental impact report. So we're basically tearing off of the environmental impact report that was done for the comprehensive plan. Because it was done so recently, we can do that. So the environmental assessments will be individual studies that we'll do specific to the housing element, and then we'll roll those into the SEIR.
So do these involve the specific sites that we've selected, or is this more of a general issue?
It's going to look at the specific sites, but not at the project level. So it's not going to be as detailed as it will be when they go to actually do development. So, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Arthur?
Yes, I assume that the FEIR happens where that the orange line is there, and at the same time as that at the final housing element.
Yes, that's because the SEIR has to be adopted at the same time as the housing element.
Can you also talk about the community engagement? And in particular, will we just be putting a microphone up there and listening, or will it be a chance to iterate it all if we get community input that resonates with us?
Yeah, so the community engagement will be, we have actually a really robust community engagement plan for this. We have the website, which will include some participatory mapping, which will be sort of a survey where people can go in and give their comments on different sites and housing options in the city. We'll have surveys that people can take. We'll have some story maps that kind of tell what housing is like in the city and the development in the city so far. And we'll have we have multiple workshops. The first one is we have on May 10th, this Monday. We're going to have a public meeting with the PTC and City Council, which will be open to the public. And then next Saturday, we have our first kind of community-focused kickoff meeting. It will be via Zoom, of course. And then we'll have a couple more community workshops throughout the process. And then we've got pop-ups scheduled as well. So we'll be going out into the community and talking to people at various locations about the housing element update and site selections and things of that nature. And all of those will be opportunities for the working group to be involved and, you know, participate and help and bring in their neighbors and, you know, all of that.
So really the chart that we're showing doesn't show all the community engagement because it's only showing stuff in 2022.
Right. Again, this is a very high level, very illustrative schedule. We do have a much more detailed schedule, but it's just not going to fit in a nice, concise one slide graphic.
Arthur, go ahead.
Oh, I sorry, I'm waiting for it to be called on. Okay, the oral communications happening at the end of the meeting does not facilitate public communication. Oral communication should happen at the beginning of the meeting, but be time bound.
Are you referring to tonight's agenda?
Yes.
Okay, just okay, thank you for that comment. It was just thought that the public may want to comment after listening to all the discussion, but comment.
Yeah, I'll take that, Tim. You know, thanks, Arthur. We did have a conversation about that, and at my request, I did ask that the public comment come toward the end. This is a kickoff meeting. We're just getting started. And I think we may follow a format similar to what we did with the NVCAP, where we might have 2 opportunities potentially for public comment once we, after this meeting, and we start getting into, on a roll here. So in the beginning and also at the end.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Just trying to move it along here. Any other questions for Della and her presentation? Okay, actually, we're right on schedule. So if there are no further questions for Della, let's go ahead and take a 10-minute break. So it is 7:17. So if we could have the group back here at 7:27, and we will have Della will have a presentation about working processes, and afterwards we'll elect co-chairs. So thank you very much. Great discussion, great questions, and we'll see you in 10 minutes. Okay. Thanks all.
Notices asking them to participate in an online survey or hearing about it in the news. So we're hoping that you can answer their questions and inform them about how to participate in the process and bring their feedback and input back to the group and incorporate that into the process. Next slide. So as a member of the working group, there's also some expectations. Attendance is extremely important. We know that it's a really big ask to commit to these meetings once a month and sometimes a bit of time in between. But because of the Brown Act requirements to have a quorum that we talked about earlier in the meeting, and to make sure that we have healthy participation and discussion, we're asking that everyone please let Tim know if you won't be able to attend a meeting. And if at any point you would like to resign from the working group, please submit a letter of resignation directly to the City Council. And the City Council will appoint one of the alternates to fill the position. And finally, if anyone needs accommodations to participate, please just let us know. Next slide. Another pop trivia. What are the 2 goals of the working group, the 2 main objectives? Just shout it out.
Produce a housing element.
That is definitely the most important thing we can do here. I was alluding to what we talked about a couple of slides ago, though.
How about housing sites?
Also important.
I'll give you a
There you
hint.
go.
One
A
thing
little
starts with
help.
a P.
Yeah.
Oh, there we go. Back. We'll go back to the slide.
There, it's an open book quiz.
Open book quiz. There we go. Okay, maybe that one was a bit too hard because it was a little. Definitely the most important thing we will do is to have a housing element that will be certified by HCD. But the answer we were looking for was to advise the City Council on policy and develop recommendations to the council.
And also to be ambassadors. So.
And also to be ambassadors. That's the 3rd one for sure.
Thank you.
Okay, next slide. A little note on media communications. Official press releases will be prepared and sent out by the city. If you receive a request from the media, please let staff know just so they can be aware, and always keep in mind when making statements to the press that actions of the working group are considered recommendations to city council. And of course, keep press comments factual, meaning not expressing opinions or personal positions when you are representing the working group. And with that, I will pass it over to Tim to do the most exciting part of the evening.
Ella, I have a quick question. You know, in the event that we are approached by the press, is it okay to say no comment?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. If absolutely, yes.
You can also refer them to the city if you either don't want to make a comment or not sure what they're asking for. You can say, hey, you know, Tim, I got this email from this reporter, you know, can you look into it? So we're happy to field that if you need any assistance.
Yeah. But good question. Good question. Okay, well, thank you, Della, for going over working group processes. And so now we'll be electing co-chairs. And so next slide. So we'll start off with the nomination process, and then we'll go into the voting phase. But the nomination process is nominations for co-chair will be made from the floor, and working group members may nominate anyone, including themselves. And a second endorsement or a second is required for the nomination. And whoever gets nominated can state whether they accept the nomination or not. And then the working group member who nominated that person and the member who seconded the nomination can make a brief statement on why they support the nomination of that particular person. And then the nominees, whoever gets nominated, may also make a brief statement regarding their candidacy. And after that process, the working group will take a vote after all nominations have been made, seconded, and the nominees have stated whether they will accept or not. And what we'll do in regards to the votes is will be tallied via roll call. And just to make sure we have all the members of the working group back, and of course, just to be clear, Jessica, as an alternate, you will not be voting for the working group. And so that's the nomination process. And just to let you know, in regards to the voting process, we're going to change a little from the handbook voting process. So in your packet, you saw that there are 3 interested candidates who submitted statements of interest. And if all 3 get nominated, what we're going to do is each member can vote for 2 candidates. They can't use both votes for the same candidates, but they have to be for 2 separate candidates. And this way, the 2 highest vote getters will become the co-chairs. And if there's one nominee with a higher vote total and a tie between the 2 second place, quote unquote, nominees, we'll have a runoff between the 2 second place nominees. And again, this is if we have 3 nominations. If we have 2 nominations, great, problem solved, if you will. We'll proceed forward with the 2 nominees. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get the process. Oh, first of all, any questions about the nomination process or the voting process? I don't see any hands raised.
Kathy's got her hand raised.
Kathy has her hand raised.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's not showing up. My apologies, Kathy. Go ahead.
We're voting publicly by a roll call rather than privately by secret ballot or some other method. It seems
correct.
Seems a little odd.
In other bodies such as the PTC or the city council, when they vote to appoint chairs, it is an open vote.
Okay.
Yeah. So, okay. Any other questions? But thank you, Kathy. Any other questions about the nomination or voting process? Yeah, I don't see any. Kathy, your hand is still up. Do you have another question or? Okay. If not, let's go ahead and get started with the nomination process. And again, just to refresh your memory, we have 3 statements from Arthur Keller, Ed Lowing, and Cheryl Klein. So do we have any nominations for co-chairs? Keith. Oh,
I would like to nominate Ed Lowing.
okay. Do we have a second? Let's see if Ed, and then I'll follow up with you, Hamilton, unless you wish to second.
I second.
Okay. So we have a Keith nominated Ed with Pat seconding. Do we have any other nominations?
I see Jasenia's hand.
Okay.
Her real hand.
Oh, all right.
Yeah,
Great.
sorry. Trying to look for the hand on the
That's
on the
okay.
screen. I would like to nominate Cheryl Klein, currently the COO for the Palo Alto Housing. And the reason is because she would like to make sure that affordable housing remains a priority in Palo Alto.
Okay. Thank you, Jasenia. Do we have a second for Jasenia's nomination?
Yeah. I second.
And is that Hamilton? Sorry, I gotta.
Oh, this is Keith.
Oh, Keith. Okay. Keith and Hamilton, your hand has been up, so go ahead.
Sure, I was going to nominate Arthur Keller.
Okay. We have a nomination for Arthur. Do we have a second?
I'll second it. Sure.
Okay, Kathy will second Arthur. Okay, and Rashawn?
I would like to nominate Cheryl Klein.
Cheryl? Okay.
And secondly, Ed.
Okay, well, we're nominating right now, and so both have been nominated. So thank you very much for your nominations. And so, okay, we have a nomination from Ed by Keith with a second from Pat, a nomination for Cheryl from Jasenia with a second from Keith, and a nomination from Hamilton with a second for Kathy for Arthur. So with the next step of the nomination process, would the nominees like to state whether they accept the
Oh,
nomination?
Tim, there's another hand up. Arthur's got the hand
I'm
up.
sorry, Arthur. My mistake.
Yes,
My
I'm wondering if we can have all 3 be co-chairs.
Okay, thank you, Arthur. It's an interesting.
I second that.
Okay, just full disclosure, in regards to 3 co-chairs, we had discussed that, and we feel that because we had co-chairs for the comprehensive plan, and that seemed to work quite well, feeling that we will move forward with just having 2 co-chairs.
I was one of those co-chairs and it worked well. It would work well with that 3.
There were 3 co-chairs.
So I was one of the 2 co-chairs and it would work well even if there are 3.
Let me just offer a comment. Thank you, Arthur, for that suggestion. And you know, I think Tim is reflecting sort of our interests in that because we think it would be helpful, but by no means, you know, is our decision, you know, does it need to carry here? So why don't we do this? Why don't we put the vote of of 2 or 3 co-chairs to the working group, and you tell us what you want. And that can be our first vote, and then that might solve the future voting from there.
Excuse me, I think the nominees have to accept the nominations first before we can have any discussions.
Fair enough. Great point, Pat. So, so Tim, we hadn't talked about that, but maybe that might be the solution here.
Okay. Well, let's start with the nominees. Do they accept their nominations? We'll start with Ed.
I do, thank you.
Okay, great. And how about Cheryl?
Yes, I do as well.
Okay, thank you very much, Cheryl. And Arthur?
Yes, I do as well.
Okay, great. So all 3 nominees have accepted their nominations. So, just based on that discussion, let's go ahead. Let's see, probably the best way to vote is
Tim, I can
we can
share,
do a full screen and everyone raise their hands, or
I think you should probably do a roll call vote on the 3-member co-chair and the 2-member co-chair. And again, I think it's appropriate. Maybe we're kind of doing this on the fly, but I think I'd like to at least offer one explanation for why we thought 2 would be helpful, and then I'd also maybe like to give Arthur or others an opportunity to express why 3 might be beneficial, just so there's equal time to that. And again, I don't know that there's a hard and fast rule to this, but one of the things that we were, it's a small group that we have already with 15 on the working group, and the idea of working with 2, again, not only just because we've had the experience of this with other, efforts in this regard, most recently the NVCAP, and of course you've heard reference to the comp plan effort. But one of the things that just sticks with me, and I don't know if this is a real issue or not, is when we're working with 2 individuals, we're trying to build on that. There's not a majority sort of opinion on how to approach things. There's 2 individuals with 2 perspectives, and we try to find an approach. My concern, and again, this may not be worth the salt of me even mentioning it, but I don't want us to be potentially set up in a situation where we've got 3 co-chairs and then it's a majority decision of the 3, or that there's any kind of dynamic. So I guess that's the bottom line, is we were concerned that it might create more more interest in that, or more potential for that. Anyways, I'll leave it at that, and I see we have a couple of hands up. Again, this is something we want to work with the working group to make a decision on how you want to proceed. And I didn't see, Tim, maybe you can help me. I didn't see whose hand came up first.
okay. Sorry, I didn't. Who had their hand? Okay.
it's Justina. I think it's Jasenia.
Jasenia, yeah.
I was gonna ask one of the points that I'm looking at the screen, if they are going to give a statement or some sort of a speech, so that we can hear why they would like to be a co-chair. Are they going to be doing that before we vote?
They'll get the opportunity, but I think right now we just want to have the group vote to whether we want 3 co-chairs or 2 co-chairs, and then we can have them give their statements after that. But let's determine whether the group wants 2 co-chairs or 3 co-chairs first.
Okay.
Okay.
And Tim, I'm sorry, didn't you say that the statements were already provided to the working group?
Yes, there were statements of interest provided to the group, but this is just another opportunity if they would like to reiterate their interest. Hamilton.
Two more
and
raised
then
hands.
Arthur.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. First of all, I want to follow up on Jacina's point. I think some of us have been sort of more in touch with the city, what's going on with the city, and we know all the people, but I don't think everybody on this committee does. And so I'd actually like to, first of all, second her point that I do think the 3 nominees should give their speeches beforehand, because some of them might be basing their vote on it. I do think we should vote on it. And I'd also like to give the counterpoint to Jonathan, for whom I have deep respect, that I actually don't think the chairs should be making decisions on behalf of the group. I mean, in the comp plan, anything substantive we voted for as a group. And for me, I feel that all 3 people running are very qualified and they all bring a different perspective to the table. And I personally, as a member of this team, would like to have all 3, because remember, they're not going to be making decisions for the organization, the group on behalf of us. They're going to just be working with staff and working through a lot of logistics and stuff. So I think this is a great idea, and I'm going to be enthusiastically supporting it. Thank you.
Okay. Arthur?
I'll just simply say that I was one of the 2 co-chairs of the Comprehensive Plan Committee, and I think it would have worked equally well if there had been 3.
Okay. And Randolph, you have your
Yes,
hand.
and I was following Jacina's comment. I think Hamilton's comment too. Yes. So if you hear the speech a little bit, then it will help, because once we vote for 3 or 2 co-chairs, the vote's already done, so to speak. The cart before the horse, the chicken or the egg, just the mathematical calculation, but nothing personal or anything like that.
That's fine. Okay, then very good. It sounds like people are interested in hearing we won't vote on that, but that's fine. It's part of the process. So would Ed, why don't you go first? I'll just with your statement of interest or why you think you should be a co-chair.
Okay, we're gonna do this before we decide if there are 3 or 2.
Yeah, yeah, that's fine.
That's good. Well, with the tight constraints that Tim put on the statement of interest, I got it down to the 252 words. So I think the statement of interest, which I'll just recap here, it is appropriately condensed to get the key points across. The one I already stated just in my own personal introduction is that we're working on the toughest problem and the toughest opportunity, the best opportunity, which is to get housing, but affordable housing, and bring in other types of residents to our mix in the city. So it's a very noble cause. As we just heard tonight, the outcome is already predetermined. There's a number there that we have to come up with the number of sites to get. So we know where we're going. That's not in question. So to get there, the one sentence that I want to emphasize in my prior written thing is that we have to prioritize and facilitate reasonable solutions. That means we all have to come at it. We have to listen to all constituents, and that constituency, as a couple of my colleagues have pointed out, is very importantly including the public in lots of ways with lots of input. So it's the constituents around the table. It's the constituents that we know about. It's the things that we hear about, but it's the direct hearings sort of that we're gonna cause. And so those solutions come from that kind of listening and for full participation from everybody here. The second thing is, sort of the skill set of doing what is required as defined by the chair. And I've done that a few times on both planning and on planning and on the Parks Commission. So I've done that 4 times in my 11 plus years. And as it happens, I bring the unique approach right now that I'm a sitting planning commissioner and in the 5th year there. Been dealing with these, difficult issues of land use and particular housing for the last 5 years. And so this is sort of, right down the center of the plate for stuff that I've been working on and I'm up to speed on. And lastly, I just want to mention that of all the people that I've worked with on all of the nonprofit groups, including commissions, I don't think you're going to find anyone that ever says that they were not heard or that they didn't get enough time to express their views on an issue before we voted. So I take that really, really seriously. I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ed. Arthur, would you like to go next?
Well, Cheryl was the next who was nominated.
Okay. All right, then. Thank you, Arthur. Cheryl?
So I've had a lot of experience over the past 20 years working with community groups and working with people who are very passionate about being heard and have different points of view. And I see myself as a bridge builder, as a community builder. I want to make sure that everybody in this committee has a voice and is heard. And I also think that the city has worked really hard to assemble a diverse group of people here that represent all cross sections of the city. And I think the leadership of the committee should also be diverse.
Thank you, Cheryl. Arthur?
Yes, I'd like to be the co-chair. I'd like to be one of the three co-chairs because I think that we each represent a different point of view. I've been co-chair of the Citizens Advisory Committee for the Comprehensive Plan, and in that group, the people were impressed with how everybody was able to be heard, and everybody's able to be to have their views mentioned. So I think that that's an important thing. I was on the Planning Commission as was Ed. In both roles, I helped forge compromises and consensus. I think that in this group, we have to basically figure out where to fit 6,088 housing units. 6,088. Now we can upzone certain parts of the city. We can talk about putting them on commercial zones. We can talk about putting in certain other zones, but we have to figure out how to do 6,088 housing units, and we have no choice to do that because we have to do it. So I think that I think that with all three of us working together, we can make that happen. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Okay. So in front of us, we have the vote for a three-person co-chair. And so, Claire, if you want to put up
my screen.
Okay.
Why don't we make this simple and just like the statement be really clear and say this is a vote yes if you want three.
Okay.
And leave it no if you want to.
So I'm sharing my screen, and this is maybe the order that we'll go through the list. And so it'll be a yes or a no for three.
Yeah.
A yes vote is for three. A no vote is for two.
Correct.
So are we going to start voting? Should I go?
You're going to get called.
I will do the roll call again alphabetically just this time. So Anupa.
So
Tim.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's by first name, alphabetical order. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm not seeing your screen.
So the first person is Ashwete. Sorry.
It's Aisha too.
Sorry.
That's okay. My vote is no.
Thank you. Anupa.
No.
Arthur.
I vote yes.
Ed. No. I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
No.
Thank you. Hamilton.
Yes.
Jean.
No.
Jennifer. Jennifer.
I don't think she's on anymore.
Okay.
Okay.
Jasenia.
Yes.
Catherine.
Sorry, yes.
Keith.
No.
Pat.
No.
Rashawn.
I got confused. If I say no, it means I pick 2 person.
No, yes, that's correct. So if you
Okay,
vote yes,
no.
you're saying you want 3 people.
No.
So no, okay. Randolph,
Before I vote, is Cheryl? Oh, Cheryl, she's after me. Yes.
Sheena,
Yes.
and Cheryl. Cheryl? Hello, are you on mute, maybe?
Yeah, I think Cheryl's on.
Oh, no.
Okay. So let me just zoom out a bit here to kind of see where we are. Oh, okay. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 for yes. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 for no. So it looks like the no vote takes it for sticking with 2 co-chairs.
Yes. Okay. Thank you for all the votes. So now we will go ahead and vote for 2 co-chairs. And so again, what we'll do is through a roll call and you vote for 2 candidates, 2 separate candidates. And we will tally the votes, and the 2 candidates with the highest vote totals shall be the co-chairs. And again, if there's one with the highest vote and then the 2 second nominees are tied, we'll have a runoff between those 2 second place nominees. So Claire, if you could go ahead and do a roll call again, and again, vote for 2 separate candidates, please.
Okay, so Aisha?
Sorry. So I vote yes for Klein and yes for allowing.
Okay, thank you.
Anupa?
Yes for Klein, yes for allowing.
Thank you.
Arthur?
I'm going to vote just for myself.
All right. Okay, Ed?
Yes for allowing and yes for Klein.
All right. Hamilton?
I vote yes for allowing and Keller.
And Jean?
Yes for Klein and allowing.
And Jennifer?
She's not here.
She's not here. Thank you. Yesenia?
Yes on Klein and allowing.
Okay, thank you. And Catherine or Kathy?
Kathy? Catherine?
Oh, sorry. Yes for Keller.
Did you want to do a second vote?
Okay.
No, okay. Keith?
Line and allowing.
Okay. And Pat?
Yes for Klein and yes for allowing.
And Rasan?
Yes on Klein and yes on Line.
Okay, thank you. Randolph?
Klein allowing.
Thank you. And Sheena?
Keller.
Okay. And Cheryl?
Klein and allowing.
Okay. So I think without having to add it up, it looks like that more votes for Klein and allowing.
Okay. All right. Well, then congratulations to co-chairs Lowing and Klein. And what we'll do is staff will be reaching out to you at a later date to talk about next steps. But once again, congratulations to the 2 co-chairs and good job working group for voting that through. Okay. And so next slide, if we could go back to the slide. Next slide, Chitra.
You know, I don't know. I just want to acknowledge. I think that was good. I mean, we had our first, you know, contentious vote. one of many that are going to befall us in this effort. So kudos to all of you for navigating through that.
Yes, kudos to the group. So right now, as probably with every meeting, we'll be asking for feedback about the meetings, or if you have any additional questions or suggestions. We always welcome feedback, and you know, what are we doing right, or what can we do better? And so just moving forward, things to keep in mind as a group. And you can always email us. Yes, Pat, I see your hand up.
Is there supposed to be a section in this meeting tonight for public communication? Oral communications?
That is coming up.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. But per the Brown Act, we always have to have public comment also. So we will be doing that.
Tim, I have my hand up as well.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
That's
I'm
okay.
sorry.
It's okay. I had some questions around procedure, and I don't know if I missed it, so I apologize. But what will be the cadence of our meetings, and just for us to get an expectation, and for each of the meetings, how long will they last? I'm just trying to plan out. You know, with 3 young kids, I want to make sure that I've got the calendar fully stocked up. So I know I only have 2 appointments or 3 right now on my calendar, but I just wanted to get a sense of what to expect every month.
That's a great question. So the working group will be meeting the first Thursday of every month from 5:30 to 8:30. And it will be through October of 2022. So we will certainly send out a calendar invite or a meeting invite for each of those dates. And so, and if you could clarify, what do you mean by cadence of the meeting?
Well, I saw there's a meeting, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think in 3 days or 4 days, there's another meeting.
Oh,
and then there's
yes.
another one. So there are a few meetings in May, but I thought we were meeting only once a month. So I was trying to just understand if we were meeting 3 times a month or.
No, May is, if you will, a special month where there are a number of events to kick off the housing element update, such as this meeting. And then the May 10th meeting is a kickoff meeting with the City Council and Planning and Transportation Commission. And then the 15th is a community meeting. So they're not working group centric, if you will. They are other meetings, but again, that's only for the month of May. Starting in June, July, et cetera, it'll just be once a month for you. We may have community events during those following months, but for the working group specifically, it's just that first Thursday, 5:30 to 8:30.
And I would just add, you're all welcome to come to those events, to the city council meeting, the joint one, and to the community workshop, but you're not required. So don't worry that if you aren't able to attend those additional meetings that you somehow are not fulfilling your duties. Any information that we get from the city council or direction or feedback from the community will bring back to you through the meetings that we have. So if that seems like a lot of meetings in the next week and you're like looking at your calendar and you can't make them all work, do not stress about it at all, please.
Thank you for saying that, Rachel.
Yes. No, it's all mandatory. You check in, you check out. We'll have time cards. No, just kidding.
Mandatory for us.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Jacinia, your hand is up.
Yes. So since we are going to be meeting virtually, are we going to have a chance to visit some of the sites once we are choosing the location of the new developments?
That's certain. as we go through the process, that's certainly something you can do on your own. I don't know about gatherings and even COVID with those
Yeah.
with vaccines, those without, but certainly as the groups chooses those sites or potential sites, I should say, you can certainly go out there on your own if you like. Yeah, that would actually be great due
Yeah.
diligence, if you will. Yeah.
Yeah, we don't have to go like all together in a group, but like just to see, physically the areas that could potentially be used for this developments.
Absolutely. Yeah. Great question. Hamilton? And then
Yeah, I don't know why, but I keep endorsing Jacina's suggestions, but like I actually did some of that for Leadership Palo Alto. Like I went to the Opportunity Center and some of these other things, and it was really helpful for me because that's not a place I normally go. And when we look at this, not everybody has been to all of these sites, and when you see it, I think it is different. I totally agree with you that we have COVID, and that we're sort of used to doing things in one way. But if there was some way to break it up into small groups, keep socially distanced, I just feel like it would be really valuable to the group if there was some way to facilitate that. And I'm not suggesting you go out and do it next month, but I do think there is a lot of value to that suggestion. I think we should be, I think it could be really informative.
Okay, thank you for that. That's something we'll look into in regards to logistics or something along those lines, but that would be great. Okay, we can certainly follow up on that. And so, Arthur.
Yes, I agree that we can go in groups of 5, which is not a Brown Act violation to these places. And secondly, I think we should have a large map of the city in zoning map. In other words, map of the when I joined the planning commission, I was given a large map of the city in various pages. It's a really large map, and that's useful for being able to see and view what the zoning is.
Okay, as part of the website?
That would be awesome.
As part of what we're handed out, because given a large map is easier to look at in person than on the website.
So you're talking about a physical map?
Yes.
Paper copy.
Paper
Okay,
copy.
paper copy.
Of the 20-page map of the city.
Well, great. We can work on that.
Yeah, sounds good. Anupa.
Yeah, I'd like to second the suggestion that we go and visit these potential sites. And before doing that, look at a map. And even before doing that, look at it on the website to see all the different neighborhoods in Palo Alto. So, eventually we want to make sure that all these site selections are evenly and equitably distributed, and they're not just clustered in one place. So yeah, let's get really familiar with all the neighborhoods, the zoning, the types of homes, and just get a really broad picture to start with. I really second that suggestion.
Okay, very good. Clearly a zoning map for everyone. So perfect. Okay, very good. Thank you all for those suggestions. This is exactly what the feedback that we appreciate, to know that to be able to provide you the material that you need. Randolph and Jasenia.
I second the maps too, and then visiting the sites. One more question is, what timeframes would you send that out? And then if we'll have any time to review it, if you have any questions.
We
Before
will
the
try to
on-site
get them
visit.
printed out. For the maps, we'll try to get them printed out whenever we can. We'll have to talk to the print shop about that. And our next meeting is not until June 4th. June 4th, I believe, or June 3rd, one of those. But we'll certainly try to get it out before that time also. Jasenia?
Yes, I have 2 more comments. I'm not sure when it's the right time, but I'll just mention them now. So I know that we are a little concerned about finding enough land to build some of these future homes. So I was thinking if maybe we can reuse some of the homes that you said that the contracts expire at the end of 40 or 55 years. So I don't know when we're going to be looking more into this, but that could I don't know if we could reuse that or it has to be a brand new, or maybe we can demolish and rebuild that. That's one. And then the other one, I like Arthur's point earlier, that possibly we can use commercial buildings. And I don't know if this has to be houses or we can include condos in some of the developments.
That's a great point. Definitely, there are many types of housing units that count as RENA housing units, so that's something we can talk about in addition. But they do need to be new housing units. So certainly, we want as a city, as a policy, to preserve existing affordable housing. But as far as the site selection, the existing affordable housing sites would not count as new housing. So certainly, a policy for preserving any of those expiring contracts that may happen from time to time.
And I love the enthusiasm. You're already thinking about visiting sites and checking things out. You're a little ahead of us, but that's great. I love that energy. We will be talking about site selections in upcoming meetings where we want to get all these different ideas from you. And also, we can also talk about site selection and some of the state requirements that are required before going out and making some of these site selections. That way you can make informed decisions, if you will, about sites with the state requirements in mind. So Arthur?
Yes, in the prior round, and I realize that this is a current round, but in the prior round, we counted some of the sites that were expiring as in terms of their ability, their requirement for low-income housing. So if we have a new requirement for the low-income housing to exist for another 30 years, we could count them. So, and also if we took existing housing and we rated low-income housing, we could count it.
Okay, thank you. Something to consider as we continue to move forward in the site selection process and how to be able to meet our RENA of over 6,000 units. So all great ideas that we should keep in mind as we move, as we do site selection in future meetings. So we've taken note of all these suggestions and we will bring them back later as we do the actual selection of sites. So thank you very much. Okay, any other questions or feedback? If not, we will go to the oral communications. Oh, sorry, next steps. So if you can, but keep the questions coming. Feel free to send us an email if you like. It's the next slide is next steps. Oh, I thought it was next steps. Okay, if Chitra, is the slide previous to is next steps? Yeah. Okay. Just we have some next steps for you, some assignments for the next meeting that we will send out to you by Monday. But what we'll be sending out is Rosenberg's rule of order. Since you're a larger group, these are just general rules that that bodies adhere to when making recommendations. It's the council goes by a version of this, and also the Planning and Transportation Commission also. Again, it's a simplified version. Also, we'd like you to go to the SB at Home website, and they have a density quiz. It's kind of a fun little quick quiz that you can take a look and try to guess what different densities are. And then also, as next meeting, we will be talking about the current housing element. Some of you have already alluded to it, but we will be going into the current housing element a little bit more. So if you could read the introduction. And the introduction is pretty short, about 7 pages. So those are assignments for next meeting. Next slide. Again, any additional information, feel free. There is our email, And also there's our webpage where, again, we want to make it really to archive all the necessary materials that you need to reference and to use it as a true resource. And so that's it for the next steps. And so at that point, we are at oral communications and public comment. And so Medina, do we have any speakers?
At the moment, I don't see any raised hands. Please raise your hand if you wish to speak. In the Zoom app, there is a raise hand button on the bottom of your screen. If you are dialing from a phone, please press *9. And I see one raised hand. Let me quickly share my screen with a timer. Okay. And our first speaker is Scott O'Neill. Sorry. You'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Hi, my name is Scott O'Neill. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to address this working group. As I know this is super early to suggest, but I wanted to offer the suggestion that as the working group starts to look at sites, you look heavily at the whole corridor along Alma and Park, and with an eye towards increasing height restrictions significantly with low parking allocations. And the reason is that reaching our arena goals is going to be very difficult politically. And part of that is that I think a lot of our neighbors don't see a lot of benefit to housing in Palo Alto. But if you allow developers to build large buildings along Alma and Park, what you're doing is you're getting private money to build a sound wall against Caltrain and freight train noise throughout the city. And so that's potentially a way to sell large numbers of housing units, which this group needs to deliver, to a broader subset of the public than than housing activists. And this area, it's very convenient to Caltrain. Like the whole area it's very easy to get to 3 Caltrain stops along the whole area, so you're not going to need a whole lot of parking. It's great for the climate by reducing commutes, reducing vehicle miles traveled, low heating costs. It's just a really great area to deliver high density in Palo Alto in a way that benefits the entire city, and not just people who need housing urgently, which is obviously an enormous concern in the Bay Area right now. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, we have our next speaker is Michael. Let me quickly, just a second. Michael, you can unmute yourself, and you have 3 minutes to talk.
Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Hi. Okay. My name is Michael Quinn. I'm a resident of College Terrace. I'd just like to express how ardently we hope that this process is conducted in good faith. There's a little bit of skepticism around that, but I and others definitely want to keep an open mind. Locations such as Stanford Mall, or locations where there are thriving businesses with long leases, are very unlikely to be developed. I would encourage members to really evaluate sites hard and choose locations that could be developed and that are relatively close to being shovel ready, because that's the only way we're going to get anywhere close in Palo Alto to hitting our goals. The previous speaker talked about Alma a little bit. I would like to direct members' attention to 101 Alma Street. It's a beautiful, somewhat older apartment building. It's been kept in very good shape, but I think it's a really good example of how we can in Palo Alto build much larger and build in a way that's attractive, that fits, that's appropriate. And, I haven't really heard any complaints about that nice old apartment building. I think it looks great. I'd also like to specifically say that many people, including myself, disagree with this notion that gets repeated and repeated that Palo Alto is built out or fully developed or something like that. I believe that's wrong, and that there is an abundance of room in the sky. I'm a New Yorker. We don't have to go super high, but we need to go higher. All right, thank you so much.
I don't see any raised hands. I believe this concludes our oral communications.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Medina. And so we are done with the public comment. And so lastly, we are ready to adjourn. But before we adjourn, just want to remind you that our next meeting is, again, June 3rd from 5:30 to 8:30. We'll send out the invites. We'll send out the Zoom invites prior. And next meeting, we'll be talking again about the current housing element and giving you an introduction to that. And the next meeting, we will continue to do a deeper dive into housing element legal requirements. And again, just as a reminder, we have the May 10th kickoff meeting with the Planning Commission and Council. And also we have the May 15th community meeting Saturday from 10 to noon. Hope to see all of you, if not most of you there. Again, no pressure, but it would be good to see all of you. And with that, thank you for a great first meeting, and everyone just have a good night. So thank you.
Thank you.
Well done, everyone. So take care.
Bye.
Thank you so much.